In advance of MASSP's Leader-to-Leader session with members of the Governor's Return to School Advisory Council, we wanted to ensure participants had at least a brief review of the My Safe Schools roadmap. My name is Bob Kefchin, and I am MASSP's Director of Government Relations. On June 30th at 3 p.m., Governor Whitmer's office released My Safe Schools, Michigan's 2020-21 Return to School Roadmap. This extensive 63-page plan outlines the requirements that schools must meet in order to reopen for instruction this fall. It also provides many recommendations for measures schools could consider to keep their students and staff safe while ensuring continued learning. The My Safe Schools roadmap is built on the same My Safe Start framework that principals are likely used to already. The plans and actions schools are required to take are going to be based at least on the 6 phases of pandemic response and recovery outlined in that plan. Similarly, which phase a school district is in will depend on which of the 8 geographic regions they fall into, though there is an effort to make these decisions at a more granular level if public health data are available. Under the roadmap, schools are required to develop 3 separate plans, depending on which of the phases their region is in. Under phases 1 through 3, schools must have a plan in place for providing fully remote instruction. In Phase 4, districts must plan for how they will resume in-person instruction subject to strict health and safety protocols. And in Phase 5, districts must consider which health and safety protocols they will keep and which remove as they are given more local flexibility. The plans must accommodate issues related to instruction, health and safety, mental and social emotional well-being, and operations. In each of these areas, some things are imposed as requirements, while others are more or less strong recommendations. With regard to health and safety protocols specifically, the roadmap outlines requirements and recommendations across a variety of areas, from personal protective equipment and hygiene, to health screening for students and staff, to athletics, to transportation. Of particular note are the requirements in Phase 4 regarding face coverings. The roadmap relies heavily on the use of face coverings, cleaning, and hygiene as the primary protective measures in schools in Phases 4 and 5. In particular, in Phase 4, where most of the state is right now, face coverings must always be worn by staff except for meals, must be worn by PK-12 students, staff, and bus drivers during school transportation, must be worn by students in hallways and common areas in the building except for during meals, and must be worn in classrooms for students in grades 6 to 12. If social distancing and cohorting is practiced and enforced, face coverings for students in grades pre-K-5 are encouraged but not required. Despite early projections about students being required to maintain 6-foot social distancing at all times, the final roadmap does not enforce social distancing in classrooms or on buses in Phases 4 and 5. And because in-person instruction would be suspended in Phase 3 or earlier, that issue is moot in those phases. Districts have until August 15th, or 7 days before the first day of school, to develop their plans and have them adopted by their local school board. If a district does not have a plan in place and posted on its website, school cannot reopen. These measures and requirements will come at a cost to local districts. To help offset some of those costs, the governor and legislature announced a bipartisan budget deal yesterday that closes the state's projected deficit for the 2019-20 school year and allocates an additional $256 million to schools, or about $175 per pupil. There are still some significant details that are not addressed in this plan. Questions around pupil accounting and seat time requirements under each of the phases remain unanswered, as do a number of other state mandates from testing to accountability. These will require legislative action and are unlikely to be resolved until July or later. Planning forward, we would encourage principals to begin considering what might fully remote instruction look like in your district next year. How might you accommodate students and staff who cannot or will not attend school in person? And how might you plan for managing the health and safety of your students and staff during in-person instruction in the fall, especially the use of personal protective equipment? To help you in that process, we hope you will join us tomorrow for our Leader-to-Leader panel discussion with members of the Governor's Return to School Advisory Council, where we will field your questions about the My Safe Schools roadmap. Thank you for joining us.